She walked into his tower carrying the one secret that could destroy them both, a 7-month pregnancy and divorce papers that would never be signed. Mara Whitmore had survived 10 months in hiding, but the moment Dominic Vale's cold eyes found the curve of her belly, she knew the most dangerous part wasn't escaping his world. It was walking back into it. If you want to know whether love can survive betrayal, bullets, and the weight of an empire built on blood, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The glass elevator climbed 73 floors in silence, each passing second tightening the knot in Mara's chest. She kept her hand pressed against her belly, feeling the flutter of movement beneath her palm, a reminder that she wasn't alone anymore, that the decision she'd made 10 months ago had consequences that grew heavier with each passing day. The divorce papers felt like lead in her bag. Outside the tinted windows, the city sprawled beneath a gunmetal sky, indifferent and endless. Somewhere down there, in the maze of streets and shadows, was the woman she'd been before Dominic Vale, before the whirlwind romance that had felt like falling and flying at the same time, before the wedding that had bound her to the most dangerous man in the city, before the night she'd realized that loving him might cost her everything. 10 months. She'd lasted 10 months in hiding, moving from one borrowed apartment to another, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the knock on the door that never came. She told herself it was because Dominic didn't care enough to look. The truth was more complicated, more terrifying. She'd covered her tracks too well, or he'd let her go. The elevator chimed. 73rd floor. The door slid open to reveal a reception area that looked like it had been carved from ice and ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a conquest. The furniture was angular, expensive, designed to intimidate. Behind a desk of black marble sat a woman whose expression suggested she'd been hired for her ability to make visitors feel inadequate. "I'm here to see Dominic Vale," Mara said, her voice steadier than she felt. The receptionist's eyes flickered over her, taking in the simple coat that couldn't quite hide her condition, the absence of jewelry, the shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, and decisions that couldn't be unmade. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him Mara is here." Something shifted in the woman's expression. Recognition, maybe. Curiosity. She reached for the phone, spoke in murmured tones, then looked up with barely concealed surprise. "He'll see you now. Through those doors, last office on the right." Mara walked through double doors of frosted glass into a hallway that smelled like leather and power. Her heels clicked against polished floors, each step carrying her closer to the moment she'd rehearsed 1,000 times in her head. She would hand him the papers. She would tell him it was over. She would walk away before he could ask questions she couldn't answer. Simple, clean, final. The door to his office stood open. Dominic Vale stood with his back to the entrance, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the empire he'd built from blood and ambition. Tall, broad-shouldered, perfectly still, he could have been carved from stone except for the barely perceptible tension in his shoulders. He knew she was there. He was making her wait. Mara stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind her with the finality of a cell door closing. 10 months. His voice was exactly as she remembered, low, controlled, carrying an edge that could cut or caress depending on his mood. Not a word, not a message. You vanished like smoke. "I'm here now." "Are you?" He turned, and the breath caught in her throat. Time hadn't softened him. If anything, the past 10 months had honed Dominic into something more dangerous than the man she'd married. His dark hair was shorter, sharper. His suit was immaculate, tailored to emphasize the power in his frame. But it was his eyes that stopped her, gray as winter storms, and just as merciless. Those eyes dropped to her belly, and the world went absolutely still. She watched his expression fracture, confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like pain flashing across his features before his control slammed back into place. But his hands betrayed him, curling into fists at his sides, the only visible sign of the earthquake happening beneath his composure. "When?" The single word sounded like it had been dragged over broken glass. 7 months. The math was simple, brutal. The child had been conceived before she disappeared, during the last fragile weeks of their marriage, when everything had been falling apart, and they'd reached for each other anyway, desperate and destructive. And you didn't think I had a right to know? His voice was deadly quiet now, the tone he used when violence was seconds away. I came to give you these. She pulled the divorce papers from her bag, held them out like a shield. Sign them. Let me go. That's all I'm asking. Dominic crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. He didn't take the papers. Instead, his hand came up to her face, fingers curling under her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're carrying my child, and you want me to sign you away? Something dangerous flickered in his expression. What happened to you, Mara? What scared you so badly that you ran? She wanted to pull away, but his touch held a familiar warmth that her body remembered even if her mind screamed warnings. This close, she could smell his cologne, cedar and smoke, expensive and intoxicating. This close, she could see the shadows under his own eyes, the new lines around his mouth. He'd suffered too. The realization shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Does it matter? She whispered. We were destroying each other. I did us both a favor. A favor? He laughed, and the sound was broken glass. You disappeared carrying my child, and you call it a favor? Sign the papers, Dominic. No. The word hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. You can't keep me here, she said, but her voice wavered. Can't I? He released her chin, but only to circle her slowly, taking in every detail, the weight she'd lost everywhere except her belly, the exhaustion in her eyes, the defensive way she held herself. You walked back into my world, Mara. That was your choice. Now you'll live with the consequences. I walked in to end this, to give you a chance to do the right thing. The right thing, he repeated, stopping in front of her again. The right thing was you telling me you were pregnant before you vanished. The right thing was you trusting me instead of running. Don't talk to me about right things when you've been lying by omission for 10 months. He was right, and that made it worse. Mara felt tears burn behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough in the past 10 months, alone in the dark, terrified and pregnant, jumping at every sound. I couldn't stay, she said. You don't understand. Then make me understand. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to an intimate register that made her pulse spike. Tell me what happened. Tell me why my wife disappeared without a trace. Tell me why you'd rather raise my child alone than stay with me. Because staying would have gotten me killed. The words exploded out of her before she could stop them, raw and true and terrible. Dominic went absolutely still, his expression transforming into something lethal. Explain that, he said, each word precise and deadly. Right now. Mara's hands shook as she wrapped them around her belly, protecting the life growing inside her. 3 weeks before I left, I overheard a conversation. 2 men in the parking garage of your building. They were talking about getting rid of a liability. They mentioned my name, Dominic. They said I knew too much, that I was a weakness you couldn't afford. His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jump. Who were they? I don't know. I couldn't see their faces, and I was too terrified to stay and find out. I just knew that someone in your organization wanted me dead, and I knew you wouldn't believe me. You think I wouldn't protect you? I think you would have demanded proof I couldn't give you. I think you would have questioned everyone, and whoever wanted me gone would have known I'd talked. I think it would have made everything worse. Her voice broke. I was scared, Dominic. Scared of your world, scared of the violence, scared that loving you meant dying young. He reached for her, but she stepped back, needing the distance. So I left, she continued. I emptied our joint account. Just my half, nothing more. And I disappeared. I thought you'd be angry, but I thought you'd let me go. I thought maybe it would be easier for everyone. Easier. The word dripped with contempt. You thought abandoning your husband and hiding his child would be easier? I thought it would keep us alive. The silence that followed was crushing. Dominic turned away from her, one hand coming up to his face, fingers pressing against his temples as if fighting off a headache or an explosion. You should have trusted me, he said finally. Whatever you heard, whoever threatened you, you should have come to me. I couldn't. Why not? Because I loved you too much. The admission tore out of her. Because I knew you'd burn the world down to keep me safe, and I was afraid of what that would cost you. afraid of what it would make you become. He turned back to her, and the expression on his face was devastating. Anger and grief and longing twisted together into something that looked like agony. "You don't get to make that choice for me," he said quietly. "You don't get to decide what I'm willing to sacrifice." "Dominic, the divorce isn't happening." His voice turned to granite. "Not now. Not while you're carrying my child. Not until I find out who threatened you and make them regret they were ever born. You can't just refuse. Watch me." He crossed to his desk, picked up his phone, and dialed with sharp, angry movements. "Marcus, I need you in my office. Now." 60 seconds later, a man entered who looked like he'd been designed to intimidate. 6'4" of solid muscle poured into an expensive suit with a face that suggested he'd seen violence and returned it with interest. His eyes swept over Mara with professional assessment before settling on Dominic. "Boss? My wife is moving back into the house. I want security tripled. No one gets within 100 yards without thorough vetting. I want backgrounds run on every person who's had access to this building in the past year. And I want the security footage from the parking garage pulled for the 3 weeks before Mara left." "On it." Marcus turned to go, then paused. "Welcome back, Mrs. Vale." The door closed behind him, leaving Mara alone with Dominic again. "I'm not moving back in with you," she said. "This is insane. You don't have a choice. I have every choice. You can't force me." "Read the prenuptial agreement." He pulled a leather folder from his desk drawer, opened it to a specific page, and held it out to her. Specifically, Section 12, subsection C. Mara's hand shook as she took the document. The legalese was dense, but the meaning was clear. In the event of divorce proceedings where children were involved, the couple was required to attempt reconciliation for a minimum period of 30 days under the same roof before any divorce could be finalized. "You knew about this clause when you signed it," Dominic said. "Your lawyer explained it to you. You agreed to it." "That was before—" She stopped, overwhelmed. "Before what? Before you realized that marriage is complicated? Before you understood that my world comes with dangers?" He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "You married me knowing what I was, Mara. You don't get to run when it becomes real. This isn't about running. This is about survival. Then survive with me." His voice softened slightly, taking on an edge of something that might have been plea. 30 days. That's all the contract requires. Stay at the house, let me protect you, and if at the end of that time you still want the divorce, I'll sign the papers." "You're lying." "I'm not." He held her gaze, and she saw the truth there, grim, determined, but honest. 30 days, Mara. Give me 30 days to find out who threatened you, to prove that you can trust me, to understand why you really left. "And if I refuse?" "Then I'll tie this up in court for years. I have lawyers who could delay these proceedings until our child graduates college." His expression hardened. "Don't test me on this. You came back into my world. You don't walk away again until I say so." Mara felt the walls closing in. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out while she still could, to protect the fragile life growing inside her from the violence that followed Dominic like a shadow. But she was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and nearly out of money. The friends who'd sheltered her were growing nervous. The borrowed time she'd been living on was running out. And God help her, part of her, the part that had loved him fiercely and completely, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. 30 days, she said finally. But separate bedrooms? And the moment I feel unsafe, the moment anything threatens this baby, I'm gone and you won't stop me. Agreed. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? She looked at his outstretched hand, strong, scarred from fights she'd never asked about, capable of terrible violence and unexpected tenderness. She thought about the man she'd married, the one who'd held her like she was precious, who'd laughed at her terrible jokes, who'd made her feel safe even in the middle of danger. She thought about the stranger he'd become in those last weeks, cold and distant, consumed by his empire. She thought about the baby moving inside her, the innocent life caught between them. Mara put her hand in his. 30 days, she repeated, not a day more. His fingers closed around hers, warm and possessive, and she felt the jolt of contact like electricity. Whatever was broken between them, the chemistry remained, dangerous, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Pack your things, Dominic said. Marcus will send a car to your apartment in 2 hours. How did you know where I was staying? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Mara, I've known where you were for the past 8 months. Did you really think I'd let you disappear completely? The revelation hit her like cold water. You've been watching me? I've been protecting you. There's a difference. He released her hand, stepped back, creating professional distance even though the air between them still crackled with tension. Go, get some rest. We'll talk more at the house. Mara turned toward the door, then paused. Dominic? The men in the parking garage. The ones who threatened me. What are you going to do when you find them? His expression went absolutely cold, and she saw the man he became in his darkest moments. The crime lord, the killer, the empire builder who'd climbed to power over the bodies of his enemies. That's not something you need to concern yourself with, he said quietly. Just know that they'll regret they ever spoke your name. It should have frightened her. Instead, some primitive part of her responded to the promise of violence, the certainty that he would destroy anyone who tried to harm her or their child. She left before she could examine that feeling too closely. The elevator ride down felt longer than the one up, each floor a descent back into reality. Mara pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the baby's movements, stronger now, more insistent. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry your father is dangerous and your mother is a coward. I'm sorry this is the world you're being born into. The baby kicked, hard enough that Mara gasped, almost like a response, almost like reassurance. The car Marcus sent was a black Mercedes with bulletproof windows and a driver who introduced himself as Thomas. He helped her into the back seat with surprising gentleness, handled her worn suitcase like it was precious cargo. Mr. Vale wants you to know the house has been prepared for your arrival, Thomas said as they pulled into traffic. Fresh groceries, your favorite foods? He remembered what you liked. The casual intimacy of that detail hit her harder than it should have. Dominic had remembered. Despite everything, despite the months apart, he'd remembered. The drive to the house took 40 minutes, carrying her out of the city proper and into the exclusive enclave where Dominic's mansion stood behind gates and walls designed to keep the world at bay. As they turned up the long driveway, Mara felt her throat tighten. She'd fled this place in the middle of the night, taking only what she could carry, leaving behind clothes and jewelry and pieces of her life. She'd driven away without looking back, tears streaming down her face, certain she'd never see it again. Now she was returning like a ghost to her own life. The house was exactly as she remembered, modern, massive, beautiful, and cold, all glass and steel and sharp angles, designed to impress rather than welcome. She'd never felt at home here, despite Dominic's efforts to fill it with things he thought she'd love. Thomas carried her suitcase to the front door, which opened before they reached it. A woman in her 50s stood in the entrance, her expression warm with genuine pleasure. Mrs. Vale! Oh, it's so good to see you. Elena, the housekeeper, pulled Mara into a careful embrace. We've missed you terribly. The house hasn't been the same. It's good to see you too, Elena. Mara returned the hug, feeling tears threaten again. Elena had been kind to her during the marriage, a maternal presence in a house that often felt too big and empty. Come. I've prepared your old room. Mr. Vale said you'd want your own space. Everything's fresh and ready. Elena ushered her inside, chattering about preparations, clearly trying to make this less awkward. The interior of the house was pristine, elegant, utterly impersonal, except for the small touches Mara recognized from her time here. The flowers Elena always kept fresh, the soft throws on the leather furniture, the photographs that Dominic had allowed despite his preference for minimalism. There was a new photograph on the mantel. Mara stopped, staring at it. Their wedding day. She was laughing, her head thrown back, joy radiating from every line of her body. Dominic was looking at her with an expression of such raw tenderness that it hurt to see. She didn't remember this photo being taken, didn't remember ever seeing him look at her quite like that, unguarded, vulnerable, completely in love. He had it framed a month after you left, Elena said softly. Sits in here sometimes, just looking at it. Won't let me move it. Mara couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Elena led her upstairs to a bedroom that had been hers in the early days of their marriage, before she'd moved into Dominic's room. It was beautiful, decorated in soft creams and blues with a window overlooking the gardens. The bed was made with fresh linens, flowers sat on the dresser, and someone had thoughtfully added pregnancy pillows. "I'll let you rest," Elena said. "Dinner is at 7 if you feel up to it. Mr. Vale will be home by then." Alone, Mara sank onto the bed and let the tears come. She cried for the marriage that had felt like a fairy tale before it became a nightmare. She cried for the fear that had driven her away. She cried for the baby who deserved parents who knew how to love each other without destruction. And she cried because coming back felt like both the safest and most dangerous thing she'd ever done. She must have dozed, because when she opened her eyes again, the light had changed and her phone showed it was 6:30. Mara dragged herself to the attached bathroom, wincing at her reflection, eyes swollen from crying, face pale, body exhausted. She showered, changed into clean clothes that actually fit, and tried to armor herself for dinner with Dominic. He was waiting in the dining room when she came down, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He changed too. The suit replaced by dark slacks and a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. Somehow he looked more dangerous in casual clothes, less businessman and more the street fighter he'd been before he built his empire. "You should sit," he said without turning around. "Doctor's orders. Pregnant women need to stay off their feet." "How do you know what doctor's orders are?" "I've been reading." He turned to face her, and his expression was carefully neutral. "Everything I can find about pregnancy, childbirth, what you're going through. I have 7 months of catching up to do." The admission caught her off guard. Mara lowered herself into a chair, grateful for it. Her ankles had been aching. Elena appeared with dinner, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, the kind of healthy meal Mara craved, but rarely had energy to prepare for herself. There was sparkling water with lemon, just the way she liked it. They ate in tense silence for several minutes before Dominic spoke. "I need you to tell me everything. Every detail of what you heard in that parking garage. Exact words if you can remember them." Mara set down her fork, her appetite disappearing. "It was late. Maybe 10 o'clock. I'd stayed to work on the charity gala we were planning. Remember that?" "I remember." "I was walking to my car when I heard voices. 2 men, standing near the stairwell. They didn't know I was there." She closed her eyes, pulling up the memories she'd tried so hard to bury. The first voice said, "The boss wants it handled soon. She's becoming a liability." The second one asked, "You sure about this? Vale won't take it well." The first one laughed and said, "Vale doesn't need to know. By the time he figures it out, Mara Whitmore will be another random tragedy. A robbery gone wrong. These things happen." Dominic's knuckles went white around his glass. "What else?" The second voice said, "What about the investigation?" And the first one said, "What investigation? We own half the cops in this city. It'll be handled." Mara opened her eyes, found Dominic staring at her with lethal focus. "That's when I ran. I didn't hear anything else." "You're certain one of them said, 'the boss'? Not my name?" "He said 'the boss.' I assumed he meant you." "He didn't." Dominic's voice was granite. "I never gave any order involving you, which means someone in my organization is operating independently, someone with authority and resources." "How can you be sure?" "Because if I wanted someone dead, Mara, I wouldn't discuss it in a parking garage where anyone could overhear, and I sure as hell wouldn't order a hit on my own wife." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "This is an internal threat. Someone undermining my authority, making moves without my knowledge." "That's why I ran. I didn't know who to trust." "You should have trusted me." He turned back to her, pain flickering across his features. "Despite everything, despite my world and my business, you should have known I would never hurt you." "I did know that. But I also knew you couldn't watch me every second, and I knew that whoever wanted me dead was smart enough to wait for the right moment." She stood too, moving closer to him. "I was terrified, Dominic. Terrified and pregnant and so tired of being afraid in my own life." "You'll never have to be afraid again." The promise in his voice was absolute. "I will find who did this, and I will make sure they never threaten you or our child again. More violence, more blood, Is that really the answer? In my world? Yes. He closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. I know you hate this part of me. I know you wish I was someone different. But this is who I am, Mara. This is what I do. And right now, it's what's going to keep you alive. She wanted to argue, to tell him there had to be another way. But looking into his eyes, she saw the truth. In Dominic's world, mercy was weakness and hesitation got you killed. The rules that govern normal lives didn't apply here, and God help her, she'd known that when she married him. 30 days, she whispered. Find your answers in 30 days and then let me go. If that's still what you want at the end of it, yes. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, the touch achingly gentle. But I'm not giving up on us, Mara. Not when I finally understand why you left. Not when I know it wasn't about not loving me. Love isn't always enough. Then what is? The question hung between them, raw and desperate. Tell me what it takes, and I'll give it to you. Safety, peace, a life where I'm not looking over my shoulder. Her voice broke. A life where our child doesn't grow up afraid. Then that's what I'll build for you. He leaned down, rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me, Mara. Trust me one more time. Let me prove I can be the man you need. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it physically hurt. But trust was a fragile thing, shattered too easily and rebuilt too slowly. I'm here for 30 days, she said. That's all I can promise. It's enough. For now. He released her, stepped back, creating space even though everything in his body language suggested he wanted to pull her closer. You should rest. The guest room has everything you need. And you? I have calls to make, people to question. His expression turned cold again, dangerous. Someone in my organization is going to answer for this, and they're going to wish they'd never been born. Mara watched him walk away, shoulders set with deadly purpose, and felt the old familiar fear creep back in. This was the man she'd married, brilliant and brutal, capable of tenderness and terrible violence, walking the razor's edge between protector and destroyer. She'd run from him once because she couldn't reconcile those contradictions. Now she had 30 days to decide if she could learn to live with them, or if loving Dominic Vale would always mean dancing with danger, one step away from falling into the abyss. The first night back in Dominic's house, Mara didn't sleep. She lay in the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a home she'd once tried to make her own. Footsteps in the hallway, the distant murmur of Dominic's voice as he made call after call, the hum of security systems that turned the mansion into a fortress. Around 3 a.m, she heard his footsteps pause outside her door. She held her breath, waiting, but he didn't knock. After a long moment, he moved on, and she heard his bedroom door close down the hall. Even separated by walls and doors and 10 months of silence, she could feel him, the magnetic pull that had drawn her to him from the beginning, dangerous and irresistible. Morning came too soon. Mara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. She hauled herself out of bed, her body protesting every movement. 7 months pregnant felt different than 6 months, different than 5. Each week added weight and discomfort and the constant awareness of the life growing inside her. She found Dominic in the kitchen, standing at the counter with his laptop open and his phone pressed to his ear. He was already dressed for the day in another immaculate suit, looking like he'd slept perfectly when she knew he probably hadn't slept at all. He glanced up when she entered, his eyes tracking over her with an intensity that made her skin warm. He said something sharp into the phone and ended the call. "There's breakfast," he said, gesturing to a spread on the table that looked like Elena had been cooking for an army. "Eat. You're too thin." "Good morning to you too," Mara said dryly, lowering herself into a chair. "I mean it, Mara. You've lost weight everywhere except—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "Except where the baby is," she finished. "I know. It's been hard to eat. Stress doesn't agree with me." Something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe, or regret. He poured her a glass of orange juice, set it in front of her with surprising gentleness. "That changes now. You're safe here. You eat, you rest, you take care of yourself and our child." He paused. "Have you seen a doctor recently?" 2 weeks ago. Everything was fine. I want you to see my doctor, the best obstetrician in the city. I've already made an appointment for tomorrow. Mara bristled at his high-handedness, even as part of her was relieved to have someone else making decisions. You can't just take over my medical care without asking. I can, and I did. You can be angry about it after you've eaten. He sat down across from her, his laptop between them like a barricade. I spent the night pulling security footage and phone records, cross-referencing everyone who had access to the building in the weeks before you left. And there are 43 people who could have been in that parking garage at the right time. I'm narrowing it down. His expression turned grim. But I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to listen to some voice recordings. See if you recognize either of the men from that night. Mara's stomach clenched. She set down the toast she'd been about to bite into. You recorded your own people. I record everything. It's insurance. He turned the laptop toward her. I know this won't be pleasant, but if you can identify even one of them, it gives me a starting point. She stared at the screen, at the list of audio files marked with names and dates. The idea of listening to voices, trying to match them to a memory she'd tried to bury, made her feel sick. I'll try, she said quietly. But Dominic, what happens when you find them? That's not your concern. It is if it makes you into something I can't recognize. She met his eyes. I need you to promise me something. What? That you won't lose yourself in this. That revenge doesn't consume you. He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. I can't promise that, he said with brutal honesty. Someone threatened to kill you, to murder my wife and make it look like a random crime. That's not something I can forgive or forget. I know, but I need you to try, for our child's sake, for... She stopped, unable to say, for my sake, because she wasn't sure she had the right to ask anymore. For yours, he finished softly. I know. They sat in charged silence until Elena bustled in, breaking the tension with cheerful updates about the house and gentle scolding about Mara not eating enough. Dominic excused himself to make more calls, leaving Mara with a plate of food she forced herself to finish. The day stretched ahead, empty and uncertain. Mara wandered through the house, reacquainting herself with rooms that felt both familiar and foreign. The gym where Dominic worked out his demons, the library filled with books she suspected he never read, the living room with its magnificent fireplace that had never been lit while she lived here. She found herself in what had been her office, a sunny room overlooking the gardens where she'd tried to build a life that involved more than being Dominic Vale's wife. Her computer was gone, removed when she left, but everything else remained exactly as she'd left it. Awards from the charity work she'd done, photographs from events she'd organized, a half-finished grant proposal still sitting on the desk. It felt like looking at artifacts from someone else's life. I kept it exactly as you left it. Mara turned to find Dominic in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I thought maybe you'd want to continue your work, he continued. The charities have been asking about you. They miss you. They miss my connection to you, Mara corrected. No one cares about Mara Whitmore. They care about Mrs. Dominic Vale and the doors she can open. That's not true, isn't it? She turned back to the window. I was never sure if people wanted me around because they liked me or because they were afraid of offending you. She heard him move closer, felt the warmth of his presence at her back. Sarah Chen called every week for the first 3 months after you disappeared, he said quietly. She wanted to know if you were okay, if there was anything she could do. When I told her I didn't know where you were, she cried. Mara closed her eyes. Sarah had been one of the few real friends she'd made in Dominic's world, another charity board member who'd seen past the glamour to the person underneath. I couldn't risk contacting anyone, she said. I couldn't risk someone telling you where I was. Because you thought I was the threat. No, because I thought anyone close to you might be compromised. She turned to face him. Your world is full of people who smile to your face and plot behind your back. I learned that quickly enough. Is that why you stopped trusting me? The question was raw, unguarded. Because you saw the treachery in my business and assumed I was part of it? I stopped trusting everyone, including myself. Mara wrapped her arms around her belly, the gesture protective and weary. I couldn't tell the difference anymore between genuine friendship and political maneuvering. I didn't know who was safe and who was dangerous, so I ran from all of it. Dominic reached out, his fingers grazing her cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. I'm sorry I made you feel that way. Sorry I brought you into a world where you couldn't feel safe. You didn't force me. I chose this. I chose you. She leaned into his touch despite her better judgment. I just didn't understand the cost until it was too late. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and heat flared between them, instant, undeniable, dangerous as it had always been. Mara saw desire darken his eyes, saw the way his gaze dropped to her mouth, and she knew he was remembering the same things she was. Late nights when they'd set the sheets on fire. Stolen moments in his office when he'd cleared his desk with one sweep of his arm and lifted her onto it. The desperate, consuming need that had defined the early days of their marriage. We can't, she whispered, even as her body swayed toward his. I know. But he didn't move away. Doesn't stop me from wanting you. Wanting isn't enough. It's a start. His hand slid into her hair, cradling the back of her head. Let me kiss you, Mara, just once. Let me remember what we had before everything went wrong. She should have said no. Should have stepped back, maintained the boundaries that were supposed to protect them both. But God, she missed this, missed him, missed the feeling of being wanted with an intensity that bordered on madness. Mara tilted her face up, giving permission without words. Dominic's mouth came down on hers, and the world caught fire. The kiss was everything she remembered and nothing like it, familiar and strange, gentle and desperate, full of 10 months of longing and loss. He kissed her like she was precious, like she might disappear if he let go, like he was trying to communicate everything he couldn't put into words. Mara kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even as her mind screamed warnings. This was dangerous. This was stupid. This was letting down her guard when she needed it most. This was coming home. Dominic pulled back first, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. I've missed you, he said, the words rough and honest. Every day, every hour. I've missed you so much it feels like dying. Tears burned behind Mara's eyes. This doesn't change anything. It changes everything. He cupped her face in both hands, his gray eyes fierce. You still love me. I can feel it. You still want this. Want us. Love was never our problem. Then what was? Trust, safety, the ability to believe in a future that didn't end in violence. She pulled away from him, needing the distance to think clearly. One kiss doesn't fix that. No, but 30 days might. He straightened, the businessman sliding back into place over the vulnerable man who'd just kissed her like she was oxygen. Give me the 30 days you agreed to. Let me prove that we can have both, the love and the safety. Before Mara could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression turned to stone. I have to take this. He stepped into the hallway, but she could hear his voice turn cold. What did you find? The conversation was brief and tense. When he came back, his eyes held a dangerous light. We have a lead. One of the voices on the security footage matches a man who's been flagged for suspicious financial activity, large payments to an offshore account in the weeks before you left. Mara's heart hammered. Who is he? Daniel Cross. He's head of security for my warehouse operations, which means he had access to everything, including information about you, your schedule, when you'd be vulnerable. Dominic's voice was deadly calm. I'm bringing him in for questioning. What does that mean? It means I'm going to find out what he knows and who he's working for. The unspoken violence in those words made Mara's skin go cold. Don't do something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not protecting you better the first time. He moved to the door, then paused. Stay here. Stay. Marcus will be outside. Don't go anywhere without him. Dominic, I mean it, Mara. Until I know who's behind this, you don't take chances. His expression softened slightly. Please, I can't lose you again. Then he was gone, leaving Mara alone with her racing thoughts and the taste of him still on her lips. The rest of the day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Mara tried to distract herself with television, books, anything to stop imagining what Dominic was doing to Daniel Cross. She knew her husband's reputation, knew that men who crossed him tended to disappear or turn up broken. She told herself she should feel horror. Instead, she felt a dark satisfaction that whoever had threatened her would face consequences. What did that say about her? Elena brought lunch and dinner, both of which Mara picked at without appetite. The baby moved restlessly inside her, responding to her stress with kicks and tumbles that were simultaneously reassuring and uncomfortable. "Your daddy is doing something terrible right now," she whispered to her belly, "and your mother is sitting here letting it happen. We're going to have to do better than this." Night fell. Still no word from Dominic. Mara found herself pacing the living room, exhaustion warring with anxiety. She should go to bed, should rest. Instead, she stood at the window, watching the gates, waiting for headlights that would signal his return. It was past midnight when she finally heard a car pull up. Mara rushed to the foyer, her heart in her throat, and stopped dead when she saw Dominic walk through the door. His shirt was spattered with blood. His knuckles were raw and split. His expression was utterly empty, the look of a man who'd done violence and felt nothing. "Oh God," Mara breathed. "What did you do?" He looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes, shame, maybe, or the recognition that she was seeing him at his absolute worst. "What I had to do," he said flatly. Cross talked. He gave me a name. "Whose name?" "Victor Vale. My uncle." The words came out bitter. "The man who helped raise me, who taught me the business, who I trusted with my life." Mara's legs went weak. She grabbed the doorframe for support. "Your uncle ordered my death. Him and someone else, a partner. Cross didn't know who. That information was kept compartmentalized." Dominic's fists clenched, fresh blood seeping from his torn knuckles. "But Victor was the inside man. The one who had access to your schedule, who knew when you'd be vulnerable. The one who wanted you gone. Why? What did I ever do to him?" "You made me weak." Dominic's voice was hollow. "That's what Cross said. Victor believed that loving you made me vulnerable, that you were a liability to the business, so he decided to eliminate you and make it look like a tragedy." Mara felt bile rise in her throat. "And now? Now Victor has 48 hours to settle his affairs before I end him." The cold finality in Dominic's voice was terrifying. "He betrayed me. He threatened my wife. That's not something I can overlook." "You're going to kill your own uncle." Without hesitation, he moved toward the stairs, favoring his left leg slightly. "He made his choice when he signed your death warrant. Now he lives with the consequences." "Dominic, wait." Mara caught his arm, and he stopped, looking down at where her fingers gripped his bloody shirt. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "You're bleeding and limping. That's not fine." She tugged him toward the kitchen. "Let me at least clean you up." For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then his shoulders sagged slightly, and he let her lead him to the kitchen table. Mara gathered the first aid kit Elena kept under the sink and dampened a clean towel with warm water. "This is going to sting," she warned, reaching for his hands. "I've had worse." She cleaned the blood from his knuckles with careful strokes, her heart aching at the damage he'd inflicted on himself. The skin was torn in several places, bruises already forming. He didn't flinch, didn't react, just watched her with that empty expression that scared her more than anger would have. "Talk to me," she said softly. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking that the man who raised me wanted to murder my wife. I'm thinking about how many times I left you vulnerable because I trusted the wrong people. I'm thinking about how close you came to dying because I was blind and stupid. You couldn't have known." "I should have known." His voice cracked slightly, the first hint of emotion breaking through. "I should have protected you better. Should have made sure you felt safe enough to come to me instead of running." Mara set down the towel and took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me. This is not your fault. Victor made his choices. The people who threatened me made their choices. You are not responsible for their evil. I'm responsible for bringing you into a world where people like Victor have power." His hands came up to cover hers, his touch gentle despite the violence still staining his skin. "I'm responsible for not seeing the threat until it was too late." You're seeing it now. You're dealing with it. She stroked her thumbs across his cheekbones. That has to count for something. Does it? Or am I just making things worse? He pulled her hands away from his face, but didn't let go. You saw me tonight, Mara. You saw what I'm capable of, and you looked at me like I was a monster. I looked at you like I was scared. There's a difference. Is there? His laugh was bitter. You should be scared. Daniel Cross is in a hospital right now because I beat the truth out of him. Victor is going to die because I can't let betrayal stand. This is who I am. This is what I do when people threaten what's mine. Mara pulled one hand free and placed it on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palm. Then maybe you need to decide who you want to be. For this child. For yourself. Maybe even for me. I don't know how to be anyone else. Then learn. Her voice was fierce now, challenging. You're one of the most powerful men in this city, Dominic. If you can build an empire, you can figure out how to dismantle the parts of it that are destroying you. It's not that simple. Nothing worth doing is. She reached for the antiseptic, applied it to his knuckles despite his wince. But you have a choice. You can let this consume you, the violence, the revenge, the endless cycle of blood for blood. Or you can find another way. What other way? Victor tried to have you killed. He betrayed everything, family, loyalty, trust. How do I let that go? I'm not saying let it go. I'm saying don't let it turn you into something worse than him. Mara wrapped his hands in clean gauze, her movements gentle and precise. Deal with the threat. Protect your family, but don't lose yourself in the process. Dominic was quiet for a long time, watching her work with an expression that cycled through pain, longing, and something that might have been hope. You still care, he said finally. Even after everything, even after seeing me like this, you still care what happens to me. Of course I do. I never stopped caring. I just didn't know how to live in your world without losing myself. She finished bandaging his hands and sat back. And I'm still not sure I can, but I'm here. I'm trying. Why? The question was raw, vulnerable. Why try when it would be easier to walk away? Mara looked down at her belly, at the visible proof of their connection. Because this baby deserves parents who tried everything before they gave up. Because part of me still believes we could be good together if we just figured out how. Because... She stopped, the admission catching in her throat. Because what? Because I still love you, you impossible, dangerous, infuriating man. And I hate that I do. The words came out angry and tender at once. I hate that I can't just turn it off. That I can't look at you without wanting you. That even now, even after everything, my heart still chooses you. Dominic's expression transformed. Grief and joy and desperate relief all crashing together. He reached for her, pulling her carefully into his arms, mindful of her belly between them. I love you too, he whispered against her hair. I never stopped. Even when you were gone, even when I was furious and hurt, I loved you. You're in my blood, Mara. You're part of me. She let herself lean into him, let herself take comfort in his strength and warmth. It felt dangerous and right, terrifying and inevitable. What happens now? She asked. Now I finish dealing with Victor. I root out anyone else who might be a threat. And I prove to you that I can build something better than what we had before. He pulled back enough to look at her. 28 days left. Give me 28 days to show you that we can make this work. And if you can't, then I'll sign the papers and let you go. But I won't stop loving you. I won't stop protecting you and our child. And I won't stop hoping that someday you'll come back. It was the most honest he'd ever been with her. No demands, no ultimatums, just raw truth laid bare between them. Okay, Mara said softly. 28 days. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Nothing like the desperate kiss from earlier. This was a new beginning, fragile and uncertain, but real. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic helped her to her feet. You should sleep. Tomorrow's the doctor's appointment, and you need rest. What about you? I have preparations to make. But I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. He touched her face one last time. You're safe now, Mara, I swear it. She wanted to believe him. wanted to trust that this time would be different, that they could find their way back to each other without the violence and fear that had torn them apart. As she climbed the stairs to her room, one hand on the railing and the other on her belly, Mara felt the weight of the choice she'd made. 28 days to decide the rest of her life. 28 days to see if love could survive in the darkness of Dominic's world. 28 days to discover if she was strong enough to stand beside a man who walked the knife's edge between protection and destruction. The baby kicked hard, as if offering an opinion on the matter. Mara smiled despite everything, whispering to the life growing inside her. "Hang on, little one. This is going to be a wild ride." She slept fitfully that night, dreams tangled with memories. Dominic's bloodied hands, Victor's name spoken like a curse, the phantom echo of threats whispered in parking garages. When morning light finally broke through her curtains, Mara woke feeling more exhausted than when she'd gone to bed. The doctor's appointment was at 10. She showered and dressed with mechanical precision, choosing a loose sundress that accommodated her growing belly. When she came downstairs, she found Dominic waiting by the front door, looking impeccable in a charcoal suit despite having been awake most of the night. "You look tired," he said, studying her face with concern. "Pot. Meet kettle." She grabbed her purse from the hall table. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough," which meant no. "The car's ready?" They drove in tense silence, Marcus at the wheel with another security guard in the passenger seat. Mara watched the city slide past the tinted windows, familiar streets that felt foreign after months away. She'd built a small life in hiding, quiet, careful, lonely. Being back in Dominic's world felt like stepping into a river with a current too strong to fight. The doctor's office occupied the top floor of a medical building in the most expensive part of the city. Of course it did. Nothing but the best for Dominic Vale's wife and child. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Mara immediately appreciated. She shook both their hands, her gaze assessing Mara with professional concern. "Mrs. Vale, it's good to finally meet you. Your husband has been quite insistent about getting you the best prenatal care." She shot Dominic a look that suggested he'd been more than insistent. "Let's get you examined and see how this baby is doing." The examination was thorough and surprisingly gentle. "Doctor." Mitchell asked questions about Mara's health during the months she'd been away, her eyebrows rising slightly at the mention of stress and irregular meals. "Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like," she said, making notes, "and you've lost weight in places you shouldn't have. We need to get you on a better nutrition plan and monitor the stress levels closely." "She'll have whatever she needs," Dominic said from his position by the door. He'd stayed for the examination, despite Mara's assumption he'd wait outside, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. "What she needs is calm and stability," Dr. Mitchell said pointedly. "Stress in the third trimester can lead to complications. Preterm labor, high blood pressure issues, problems with the placenta. We want to avoid all of that." "She'll have calm and stability," Dominic replied, his tone brooking no argument. Dr. Mitchell turned to Mara with a slight smile. "Is he always this intense?" "You have no idea," Mara said dryly, and the doctor laughed. The ultrasound came next, and Mara felt her heart clench as the image appeared on the screen, impossibly tiny and impossibly perfect, their daughter moving in the fluid darkness of her womb. She heard Dominic's sharp intake of breath, saw him move closer to the monitor with an expression of wonder that cracked something open in her chest. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "She's healthy," Dr. Mitchell confirmed. "Good size, strong heartbeat, all the measurements looking excellent despite the stress you've been under. You've done well taking care of her, Mara." Tears burned in Mara's eyes as she watched the baby on the screen, watched her daughter stretch and turn, oblivious to the chaos surrounding her existence. This tiny person who would be born into a world of violence and power, who deserved so much better than parents who couldn't figure out how to love each other without destruction. Dominic's hand found hers, squeezing gently. When she looked up at him, she saw tears in his eyes too. This dangerous man undone by the sight of his unborn child. "We're going to do better for her," he said quietly. "Both of us. Whatever it takes." Mara wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could transform into the parents this baby deserved. The appointment wrapped up with instructions about diet, exercise, and follow-up visits. Dr. Mitchell handed Mara a folder of information and a prescription for prenatal vitamins. I want to see you weekly from now on, she said. Given the stress factors and your history, I'd rather be cautious. Any cramping, bleeding, severe headaches, or vision changes, you call me immediately. Understood? Understood, Mara agreed. In the car heading back to the house, Dominic was uncharacteristically quiet. Mara watched him from the corner of her eye, saw the way his fingers drummed against his thigh, a rare tell that he was processing something intense. What are you thinking? She asked finally. That I've wasted 10 months. That I should have been there for every appointment, every milestone. That our daughter has been growing inside you all this time and I knew nothing about it. His jaw tightened. I'm thinking about how much Victor stole from us. From me. Don't let him steal anymore, Mara said softly. Don't let anger take this moment from you. He looked at her then, his gray eyes burning with intensity. I'm not angry. I'm grateful. Grateful that you're both healthy. Grateful that you came back. Grateful for another chance to get this right. The vulnerability in his voice made her throat tight. We'll see. 27 days left, he said. I'm counting every one of them. When they arrived back at the house, Marcus was on the phone before the car even stopped. His expression turned grim as he listened. Then he met Dominic's eyes in the rear-view mirror. Boss, we have a situation. Victor's made a move. Dominic's entire demeanor changed, softness hardening into steel, tenderness replaced by lethal focus. What kind of move? He's calling in favors, reaching out to allies. Word on the street is he's planning to strike first. Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. He knows you're coming for him. Of course he does. Victor's not stupid. Dominic helped Mara out of the car, his hand protective on her lower back. Get her inside. Full lockdown protocols, no one in or out without my direct approval. Dominic? Mara started. Not now. His voice was clipped, already moving into the mode she recognized. The crime lord, the tactician, the man who commanded an empire through fear and force. Marcus, get Thomas and Chen. War room in 10 minutes. 10 Chen. Mara watched him stride into the house, phone already pressed to his ear, and felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. This was the part she'd never been able to reconcile. The switch from tender lover to ruthless commander, the ease with which he moved between worlds. Elena appeared at her elbow, gently guiding her toward the living room. Come, Mrs. Vale, let's get you something to eat while the men handle their business. Their business might get us all killed, Mara said, more sharply than she intended. Elena's expression was sympathetic but unsurprised. Mr. Vale has handled worse. He'll keep you safe. That's what I'm afraid of. What he'll do to keep me safe. She let Elena settle her on the couch with tea and sandwiches, but her appetite had vanished. Through the walls, she could hear raised voices from Dominic's office. The war room he'd mentioned. Plans being made, strategies being deployed, violence being organized with the precision of a military operation. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Mara tried to read, to watch television, to do anything to distract herself from the activity happening elsewhere in the house. Men came and went through the front entrance, hard-faced, dangerous men who moved with the confidence of those accustomed to violence. She recognized some of them from her previous life here. Others were strangers. All of them looked at her with a mix of respect and wariness, as if she were both treasure and liability. Around 4 o'clock, the house went silent. The stream of visitors stopped. Mara heard Dominic's office door open, heard his footsteps approaching. She looked up as he entered the living room, and her breath caught at the expression on his face. We need to leave, he said without preamble. Now. What? Why? Because Victor's move wasn't reaching out to allies. It was a diversion. His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. He sent a team to hit the house. They're 15 minutes out. Ice flooded Mara's veins. How do you know? Because I have people watching his people, and one of them got word to Marcus 5 minutes ago. He was already pulling her to her feet, one hand supporting her as she struggled upright. There's a safe house across the city. We're going there until I can neutralize the threat. You mean until you can kill Victor? Yes. No hesitation, no apology. I told you I'd protect you. That's what I'm doing. Marcus appeared with a go bag already packed. "Car's ready, boss. Back exit. Thomas is sweeping the route." They moved through the house at a pace that made Mara's heart hammer and her breath come short. Dominic's hand never left her back, guiding and supporting her with gentle insistence. Elena waited at the back door with tears in her eyes. "Be safe, Mrs. Vale," she whispered, pressing something into Mara's hand. A rosary. "I'll pray for you both." "Don't come back here," Dominic told her. "Not until I give the all clear. Take the week off. Paid." They emerged into the garage where a nondescript sedan waited with engine running. Marcus took the driver's seat, another guard riding shotgun. Dominic bundled Mara into the back and climbed in beside her, his body a shield between her and the window. The car rocketed out of the garage and down the driveway with controlled speed. Mara clutched the door handle as they hit the street, tires squealing slightly on the turn. "How many men is he sending?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Enough to be a problem if we'd stayed." Dominic had his phone out, typing rapidly. "Not enough to matter in an open fight, but inside the house with you there as a target, I couldn't take chances. So we run. We retreat strategically. There's a difference." He finished his message and looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry. I thought we'd have more time before this escalated. You thought Victor would come after you directly, not me. I underestimated how desperate he is, how much he wants to hurt me." Dominic's hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. "But he's made a critical mistake. He's shown his hand before he was ready to play it. Now I know exactly where he stands." Mara wanted to ask what that meant, what Dominic was planning, but the look in his eyes told her she didn't want to know the details. Instead, she focused on breathing, on keeping calm for the baby who kicked restlessly inside her. The drive took 30 minutes through routes that seemed deliberately convoluted. They doubled back twice, switched cars once in an underground garage, and finally pulled up to a building that looked like a converted warehouse in a neighborhood Mara didn't recognize. "It's secure," Dominic said, reading her expression. "Reinforced walls, advanced security system, supplies for 2 weeks if necessary. You'll be safe here." The interior was surprisingly comfortable. Industrial chic with exposed brick and modern furniture, a kitchen stocked with enough food for a small army, bedrooms that looked like they belonged in a luxury hotel rather than a safe house. "How many of these places do you have?" Mara asked as Dominic guided her to the master bedroom. "Enough. Comes with the territory." He set the go bag on the bed and turned to her. "I need you to stay here while I handle Victor. Marcus will be here with 2 others. You'll have everything you need." Fear spiked through her. "You're leaving?" "I have to finish this. Tonight, if possible. The longer Victor has to plan, the more dangerous he becomes." He cupped her face in his hands. "I can't have you in danger, Mara. I can't focus on what needs to be done if I'm worried about you. And I'm supposed to sit here wondering if you're coming back?" Her voice broke. "Wondering if our daughter will grow up without a father?" "I'm coming back. That's a promise." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, soft, desperate kisses that felt like goodbye. "But I need to end this. For you, for our child, for any chance we have at a future. Dominic, please, I love you." The words were fierce, final. "Whatever happens tonight, remember that I love you, that everything I'm doing is to keep you safe." Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the bedroom with tears streaming down her face and terror clawing at her chest. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression sympathetic. "He'll be fine, Mrs. Vale. I've seen him handle worse." "That's supposed to comfort me." "It's supposed to be the truth." He gestured toward the living area. "Come on, let's get you settled. Boss's orders. You eat dinner, take your vitamins, and try to rest." Mara let him lead her back to the main room, too numb to argue. 2 other guards were positioned by the windows and door, young men with hard eyes and the kind of readiness that suggested they knew how to use the weapons she could see holstered under their jackets. This was her life now. Hiding in safe houses while Dominic went to war with his own uncle. Surrounded by armed guards while violence played out in the shadows of the city. Waiting to find out if the man she loved would come home or if she'd be raising their daughter alone. Elena had packed the go bag with Mara's things. Comfortable clothes, toiletries, the prenatal vitamins from Dr. Mitchell. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was the framed photograph from the mantel, their wedding day. Dominic looking at her with unguarded love. Mara traced his face with one finger, remembering that moment. The way he'd whispered his vows like they were sacred, the way he'd kissed her like she was his salvation, the way she'd felt invincible in his arms. How had they gone from that to this? Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Marcus made her eat, made her drink water, made her take her vitamins like she was a child who needed supervision. She knew he was following orders, knew Dominic had probably been explicit about her care, but it still chafed. Around midnight, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "It's done. Victor won't be a threat anymore. Coming to you soon." Mara stared at the message, relief and horror warring inside her. Victor was dead. Dominic had killed his own uncle. The violence she'd feared, the darkness she'd run from, had played out exactly as she'd known it would, and she was relieved. What did that make her? Marcus's phone rang. He answered with clipped efficiency, listened, then visibly relaxed. "Understood. We'll be ready." "He's okay?" Mara asked, needing to hear it confirmed. "He's fine. On his way here now." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "Told you he'd handled worse." 20 minutes later, she heard the security system disengage, heard the front door open. Mara was on her feet before she could think, rushing toward the entrance despite Marcus's half-hearted protest. Dominic stood in the doorway, and her heart stuttered. He looked exhausted, face drawn, eyes shadowed, shoulders carrying the weight of what he'd done. But he was whole, alive, home. Their eyes met across the room and something passed between them. Understanding, grief, relief, all tangled together. "It's over," he said quietly. "Victor's dead. His allies scattered. The threat is neutralized." Mara crossed to him in 3 strides and wrapped her arms around him, not caring about Marcus or the guards or anything except the solid warmth of Dominic against her. He held her tight, his face buried in her hair, his breath coming in shuddering gasps that might have been sobs. "I thought I'd lose you," she whispered. "I thought you'd get yourself killed and I'd be alone again. I promised I'd come back. I keep my promises." He pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. "It's done, Mara. You're safe. Our daughter is safe. We can start over." "Start over," she repeated, "like it's that simple." "Nothing about us has ever been simple." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "But we're still here. Still fighting. That has to count for something." She wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at him for the violence, for the blood on his hands, for choosing that path when surely there had been another way. But looking into his eyes, seeing the exhaustion and pain and desperate hope there, she couldn't find the words. Instead, she kissed him, soft and slow and achingly tender, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips against his. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. 26 days left, he murmured. "Give me 26 more days to prove we can make this work." "You just killed your uncle," Mara said, not an accusation but a statement of fact. "How do we come back from that?" "The same way we come back from everything else. Together." His hands slid down to rest on her belly, feeling their daughter move beneath his palms. She deserves parents who don't give up, who fight for each other as hard as they fight against their demons. "I'm tired of fighting." "Then let me fight for us. Let me be the one who doesn't give up." He kissed her again, gentle and reverent. "Go to bed, love. You're exhausted. We'll talk more in the morning." Mara let him guide her to the bedroom, let him help her out of her shoes and into bed like she was fragile and precious. He pulled the covers up around her, smoothed her hair back from her face. "Stay," she whispered. "Don't make me sleep alone tonight." Something softened in his expression. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to be alone. Not tonight. Not after—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Dominic shed his jacket and shoes and climbed into bed beside her, fully clothed, pulling her carefully into his arms. Mara curled against him, her belly pressed against his side, her head on his chest, where she could hear his heartbeat, steady, strong, alive. "Tell me about her," Dominic said quietly. "Tell me about the pregnancy. Everything I missed." So she did. She told him about the morning sickness that had lasted into the 5th month, about the first time she'd felt the baby move and had cried because she was experiencing it alone. She told him about the midnight cravings for pickles and ice cream, about the exhaustion that made her sleep 14 hours a day, about the doctor's appointments where she'd held her breath waiting for confirmation that everything was okay. She told him about the fear, constant, gnawing fear that someone would find her, that the baby would be hurt, that she was making terrible choices that would impact an innocent life. And she told him about the love, fierce, overwhelming, transformative love for a person she hadn't even met yet, love that made her understand for the first time what it meant to be willing to die for someone. Dominic listened without interrupting, his hand making slow circles on her back, his breathing deep and even. When she finally ran out of words, the silence between them was comfortable rather than tense. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he said finally. "Sorry you had to go through all of that alone. Sorry I let you down." "You didn't let me down. I ran away before you had a chance to try." Mara tilted her face up to look at him. "We both made mistakes, but maybe we can stop making them now." "Maybe," he agreed, "if we're lucky and stubborn and willing to do the work." "Are you? Willing to do the work? For you? For our daughter?" His arms tightened around her. "I'd do anything, be anyone. Burn the whole world down if that's what it took." "That's the problem, though," Mara said softly. "I don't need you to burn the world. I need you to build something better, something that doesn't require violence and fear to survive." "I don't know if I know how to do that." "Then learn. For her, if not for me." She placed her hand over his where it rested on her belly. "She deserves a father who knows how to be gentle, who can show her what strength looks like without weapons." "I can try," Dominic said, and the vulnerability in his voice broke her heart. "I'll probably fail sometimes, probably make mistakes. But I'll try, Mara. For both of you, I'll try." It wasn't a promise of transformation, wasn't a guarantee that everything would be perfect, but it was honest, and right now, honesty was all she needed. "That's enough," she whispered. "Trying is enough." She felt him relax beneath her, some of the terrible tension leaving his body. His hand resumed its slow circles on her back, soothing and tender, and Mara felt herself drifting towards sleep for the first time in days, without fear keeping her awake. "Dominic?" she murmured, half asleep. "Hmm? Don't let me go, not tonight. Just hold me, and let me pretend everything's okay." His arms tightened, pulling her impossibly closer. "I've got you, love. I'm not letting go." And for that one night, surrounded by danger but safe in his arms, Mara let herself believe him. She woke sometime before dawn to find Dominic awake beside her, his gray eyes watching her in the dim light filtering through the blinds. "You should be sleeping," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "Can't. Too busy watching you." His finger traced the curve of her cheek. "I keep thinking about how close I came to losing you, to never knowing about our daughter, to spending the rest of my life wondering where you were. But you didn't lose me. I'm here. For 26 more days, then you might walk away forever." Mara pushed herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the half-light. "Do you really think I could walk away now? After everything?" "I don't know. Can you?" The question was raw, unguarded. "Can you really accept who I am, what I do, the world I operate in? Or are we just delaying the inevitable?" She wanted to give him easy reassurance, but they'd both had enough of lies and half-truths. "I don't know either. I know I love you. I know I want to believe we can make this work, but I also know I can't live in constant fear. Can't raise our daughter in a world where violence is always one wrong word away." "What if I walked away?" The word seemed to cost him. "From all of it. The business, the empire, everything that makes me who I am." Mara's breath caught. "You can't mean that." "Why not? If it's a choice between power and you, between my empire and my family, why can't I choose differently?" His hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. "Victor's dead. His allies are scattered. I've consolidated enough power that walking away wouldn't leave a vacuum. I could do it, Mara. I could leave it all behind." "And become who?" "What would you do, Dominic? You've been building this empire since you were 20 years old. It's not just what you do, it's who you are." "Then maybe it's time to find out who I could be without it." He pulled her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. I've been thinking about it all night, about what kind of father I want to be, what kind of husband. And I keep coming back to the same answer. Not this. Not the man who rules through fear and violence. Not the man who makes his wife run in terror. Tears burned in Mara's eyes. You'd really give it all up? For me? For us? For our daughter? For a chance at a life that doesn't end in blood and betrayal? His voice was fierce, certain. I have enough money to never work again. We could go anywhere, be anyone. Start fresh where no one knows Dominic Vale or what he's done. That's a beautiful dream, Mara whispered. But is it realistic? Can you really walk away from that kind of power? And even if you could, what about all the people who depend on you? Your legitimate businesses, the people you employ? The legitimate businesses can be sold or transitioned to professional management. The people will find new jobs. And the illegitimate parts, he paused, jaw tightening, those can burn. I built them. I can tear them down. Mara studied his face, trying to see past the words to the truth underneath. You're serious about this? Completely. He sat up, pulling her with him so they faced each other in the dim light. I've spent the past 10 months realizing what matters. It's not power. It's not empire. It's you. It's the family we could build together if I just have the courage to choose it. And if I asked you not to? If I said I couldn't let you sacrifice everything for me? Then I'd tell you it's not a sacrifice. It's the smartest thing I've ever done. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Don't you see, Mara? You already saved me once just by loving me. Let me save us both by walking away from the darkness. She wanted to believe him, wanted to imagine a life where they could be normal, safe, free from the violence that had nearly destroyed them. But doubt crept in, insidious and cold. What if you resent me later? What if you wake up in 5 years and hate me for making you give up your empire? You're not making me do anything. This is my choice. His voice was absolute, certain, and I could never resent you for giving me a reason to become someone better. Mara kissed him then, soft and desperate, pouring all her hope and fear and fragile trust into the connection between them. He kissed her back with equal intensity, his hands gentle on her swollen belly, always mindful of their daughter between them. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and shaking, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. 26 days, he repeated. Let me spend them proving I mean this. Let me show you I can dismantle my empire as efficiently as I built it. And at the end, if you still want to leave, I'll sign those papers and let you go. But I'll follow you, Mara. Wherever you go, whatever life you build, I'll be there. Not as Dominic Vale, the crime lord, but as the man who loves you more than power. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing anyone had ever offered her. Okay, she whispered. Show me. The next morning, Dominic was already on the phone when Mara woke. She could hear his voice from the kitchen, clipped, decisive, nothing like the vulnerable man who'd held her through the night. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had his promises been just words, beautiful lies told in the darkness? Then she heard what he was saying. I want all of it liquidated. The warehouses, the distribution networks, everything that touches the illegal operations. Give the workers severance packages, generous ones. I don't care what it costs. A pause. Yes, I'm certain. No, this isn't temporary. I'm out. Mara stood in the doorway, one hand on her belly, watching him pace the length of the kitchen. He'd showered and changed into fresh clothes that Marcus must have brought, but exhaustion still lined his face. When he saw her, something softened in his expression. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, and ended the conversation. Good morning. You're really doing it, she said, still not quite believing. Dismantling everything. I told you I would. He crossed to her, pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. Sit. You need to eat. I made breakfast. Well, I attempted breakfast. Elena would probably be horrified. She sat, looking at the spread he'd assembled. Scrambled eggs slightly overdone, toast burned at the edges, fresh fruit that looked store-bought rather than prepared. It was possibly the most endearing thing she'd ever seen from a man who usually had staff handling every detail of his life. You cooked, she said, fighting a smile. I burned toast and scrambled eggs. Let's not overstate my accomplishments. He poured her orange juice, set vitamins next to her plate. But I'm learning. Figured our daughter should have a father who knows how to make her breakfast. The casual way he said, our daughter, the domestic normalcy of the moment, it all felt surreal after the violence of the previous night. Mara picked up her fork, tasted the eggs. They were oversalted and rubbery, but she ate them anyway because Dominic Vale had made her breakfast with his own hands, and that mattered more than culinary perfection. What happens now? She asked between bites. With the business, I mean. You can't just walk away without consequences. There will be consequences. People who relied on me for work, for protection, for power, they'll scramble to fill the vacuum. Some of them will succeed. Others will fail spectacularly. He sat across from her with coffee. But that's not my problem anymore. I'm choosing you, Mara. I'm choosing our family. Let someone else play king of the underworld. And the legitimate businesses? The restaurants? The real estate holdings? Those I'm keeping, but transitioning to professional management. I'll be an investor, not an operator. Present at board meetings, making strategic decisions, but not running day-to-day operations. He reached across the table, took her hand. I want time, Mara. Time to be a husband and father. Time to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly fighting for power. She wanted to ask if he was scared, if walking away from everything he'd built terrified him the way it terrified her. But looking at his face, she saw determination rather than fear. The same ruthless focus he'd once applied to building his empire now directed toward tearing it down. How long will it take, she asked, to fully extract myself? Maybe 2 weeks. I'm not doing this halfway. When I'm out, I'm completely out. No back channels, no secret influence, no emergency callbacks. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I want a clean break. For all of us. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Boss, we need to talk about security protocols. If you're really stepping away, there are people who might see that as opportunity. Then let them see it as opportunity. I'm not interested in holding power through fear anymore. Dominic's voice was firm. Increase security around Mara and the house, but I'm done with preemptive strikes and showing strength. If someone comes at us directly, we defend. Otherwise, we let it go. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. Understood. I'll brief the team. After he left, Mara studied Dominic with new eyes. You're really changing everything. I'm trying to become the man you need me to be, the man our daughter deserves. He stood, pulled her gently to her feet. Come on. There's something I want to show you. He led her to the safe house's second bedroom, which she'd assumed was just another sleeping space. Instead, she found it transformed. The bed pushed against one wall, and in the center of the room, boxes upon boxes of baby supplies. A crib still in its packaging, a changing table, stacks of tiny clothes and soft pastels, blankets and toys, and more items than one baby could possibly need. When did you... Mara's voice caught. Last night, after you fell asleep. I called a 24-hour service, had them deliver everything. He moved to the crib box, running his hand over the packaging. I realized I'd missed so much already. Didn't want to miss preparing a space for her. Even if it's just temporary, even if we move back to the house or somewhere else entirely, I wanted her to have a room. Tears spilled down Mara's cheeks. She'd been so focused on survival, on making it through each day, that she hadn't let herself think about nurseries and baby preparations. Seeing it all here, purchased by a man trying desperately to prove he could be a father, broke something open inside her. You really mean this, she whispered. All of it. The walking away, the changing, the becoming someone different. I've never meant anything more in my life. He crossed to her, wiped her tears with gentle thumbs. I know I can't undo the past, can't erase who I was or what I've done, but I can choose who I become from here. And I choose this. Choose you. Choose our daughter. Choose a life that doesn't end in violence. Mara pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like salt and hope and new beginnings. When they broke apart, she rested her hand on her belly, feeling their daughter's movement beneath her palm. She's kicking, she said softly. Want to feel? Dominic's hands covered hers, and his expression transformed as he felt the baby move, wonder and joy and something that looked like reverence. She's strong. Like her father, Mara covered his hands with hers, but hopefully with better judgment about who to trust. hopefully with her mother's courage and her father's stubbornness. He pressed a kiss to Mara's forehead. 25 days left. Let me keep proving I can do this. The days that followed were unlike anything Mara had experienced in their relationship. Dominic threw himself into dismantling his empire with the same intensity he'd once used to build it, but now he made sure she was part of the process. He showed her the contracts being dissolved, the assets being sold, the people being compensated. He was transparent in a way he'd never been before, letting her see the machinery of his world as he systematically took it apart. But he also made time, real time, not the stolen moments between meetings that had characterized their marriage. He cooked breakfast every morning, getting marginally better with each attempt. He insisted on attending another doctor's appointment where Dr. Mitchell pronounced both Mara and the baby healthy and thriving. He sat with her in the evenings, reading pregnancy books and asking questions about childbirth that ranged from practical to absurd. "It says here the baby can hear us," he said one night, looking up from a book about fetal development. "Should we be reading to her?" "If you want to," Mara said, amused by his earnestness. So he read, not children's books because they didn't have any yet, but whatever was at hand. Business journals, the news. Once, memorably, the instruction manual for assembling the crib. Their daughter was going to be born knowing corporate jargon and furniture assembly terminology. On the 5th day, Sarah Chen called. Mara stared at her phone, surprised to see the name after so many months of silence. "It's okay," Dominic said, looking up from his laptop where he was reviewing the sale of a warehouse. "Answer it. You don't have to hide anymore." Mara accepted the call with shaking hands. "Sarah?" "Oh my God, Mara!" Sarah's voice was thick with tears. "I've been so worried. Dominic said you were back, that you were safe, but I needed to hear your voice." "I'm okay, we're okay." "We?" Sarah's voice rose with excitement. Is there a baby?" Mara laughed despite herself. 7.5 months pregnant. A girl. The squeal that came through the phone made her pull it away from her ear. Dominic grinned from across the room, clearly hearing Sarah's reaction. They talked for an hour, Sarah catching her up on the charity work, the people who'd asked about her, the gala that had been postponed indefinitely when Mara disappeared. It felt like coming home to a part of herself she'd thought lost forever. When she finally hung up, Dominic was watching her with a soft expression. "That sounded good," he said. "It was. I missed her, missed having friends." Mara set her phone down. "I didn't realize how isolated I'd become until I was gone." "That's changing, all of it." He closed his laptop, gave her his full attention. "I want you to have your life back, Mara. Your friends, your work, your independence. I don't want to be the man who makes you small." "You never meant to, but your world is—" She paused, searching for words. "Overwhelming, all-consuming. It's hard to maintain an identity when you're married to someone like you." "Someone like me," he repeated. "A crime lord, a killer, a man who rules through fear." "Someone powerful," she corrected gently. "Someone whose presence fills every room, someone people are afraid to contradict." She moved to sit beside him on the couch. "I love you, Dominic. But loving you has always felt like standing too close to the sun, beautiful and dangerous and likely to burn. Then I need to learn how to be less sun and more— What? What do you need me to be?" "Just a man, my husband, our daughter's father." She took his hand, placed it on her belly where the baby was doing acrobatics. "Not Dominic Vale, the legend, just Dominic." "I don't know if I know how to be just Dominic." "Then we'll figure it out together." She leaned her head on his shoulder. 21 days left. You're doing better than I expected." "High praise," he said dryly, but she could hear the smile in his voice. On day 12, Celeste Rowan showed up at the safe house. Marcus intercepted her at the door, his hand on his weapon, but she raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "I need to speak with Dominic. It's important." Dominic appeared behind Marcus, his expression going cold when he saw who it was. Celeste had been a business partner, a trusted ally in several ventures. She was also beautiful, ambitious, and had made no secret of her interest in Dominic during his marriage to Mara. "What do you want, Celeste?" His voice could have frozen water. 5 minutes of your time, please." She glanced at Marcus, at the obvious security, and something flickered in her expression. I heard about Victor, about you stepping away from the business. I need to know if it's true. It's true, and it doesn't concern you. But it does, because I was part of it. The admission came out rushed, desperate. Victor approached me 6 months ago, said he needed help with a delicate situation, said you were making mistakes because of Mara, that she was making you weak, that the business needed leadership that wasn't compromised by emotion. Mara appeared in the hallway, drawn by the conversation. When Celeste saw her, visibly pregnant, standing in Dominic's safe house, her face went pale. "You came back," Celeste said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think you would. I thought—" "You thought what?" Dominic's voice was lethal now. "That she'd stay gone? That I'd forget about my wife and turn to you? Is that what Victor promised you? He said you'd be better off without her, that she didn't understand your world, didn't belong in it. He said once she was gone, you'd see—" Celeste stopped, seeming to realize how damning her words were. Mara felt ice flood her veins. "You helped him. You were part of the plan to kill me." "No!" Celeste's eyes were wild now, panicked. "I didn't know about that. I swear to God I didn't know he was planning to kill you. He just said he was going to handle the situation, make things easier for Dominic. I thought he meant bribing you to leave or something, not murder." "But you didn't ask questions," Dominic said, his voice soft and dangerous. "You didn't think to question what handling the situation meant. You just went along with Victor's plan because you wanted what I had with Mara." "I'm sorry." Tears streamed down Celeste's face. "I'm so sorry. I came here to tell you everything, to make it right. I heard you killed Victor, and I knew I had to confess before you found out another way." Marcus had his gun out now, not quite pointed at Celeste, but close enough to be a threat. Dominic held up a hand, stopping him. "Tell me everything," he said. "Every conversation with Victor, every plan you knew about, every person who was involved. Leave nothing out." Celeste talked for 20 minutes, her voice breaking repeatedly as she outlined Victor's conspiracy. She'd provided information about Mara's schedule. She'd helped arrange the offshore accounts that paid the men in the parking garage. She'd been present for planning sessions where Victor discussed removing obstacles from Dominic's path. But she swore, and Mara found herself believing her, that she hadn't known the obstacle was going to be removed permanently. She'd thought Victor meant bribery, intimidation, maybe a scandal that would drive Mara away, not assassination. When she finished, the silence was crushing. "I could kill you right now," Dominic said conversationally. "Marcus would help me hide the body. No one would ask questions. You'd just disappear, another casualty of the business." Celeste nodded, tears still streaming. "I know, I deserve it." "You do," Mara said, surprising herself by speaking. "You helped a man plan to destroy my life because you wanted my husband. That's unforgivable." "I know," Celeste whispered. "But I'm not going to let Dominic kill you," Mara continued, moving to stand beside her husband. "Not because you deserve mercy, but because we're done with that life. Done with violence and revenge and blood." Dominic looked at her, surprise flickering across his features. "Mara? She came here to confess knowing you might kill her. That took courage, however misguided." Mara kept her eyes on Celeste. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to give Marcus a full written statement detailing everything you told us. Then you're going to leave this city and never come back. If I ever see you again, if you ever contact Dominic or try to involve yourself in our lives, then we revisit the conversation about consequences. Understood?" Celeste nodded frantically. "Understood. Thank you. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me. Just go." Mara turned away, unable to look at the woman any longer. Marcus escorted Celeste to another room to take her statement, leaving Mara and Dominic alone. He stared at her with something like awe. "You just showed her more mercy than she deserved." "I showed her the mercy you're trying to learn," Mara said. "The mercy that chooses life over death when possible. Isn't that what we're working toward?" "You're right. You're absolutely right." He pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly. "But God, part of me wanted to make her pay for what she did to you." "I know, but that's the old Dominic talking, the new one, the one who's going to be a father in 2 months. He finds a different way." He pressed his face into her hair, breathing deeply. I love you. Have I told you that today? Not in the last few hours. I love you. You make me want to be better than I am, better than I ever thought I could be. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, until Marcus returned with a thick envelope. Her statement, he said, handing it to Dominic. Detailed, signed, notarized. And she's on a plane to Seattle in 3 hours. Said she has family there. Good. Dominic set the envelope aside without opening it. Make sure she actually leaves. If she's still in the city by midnight, we have a different conversation. On it, boss. After Marcus left, Mara touched Dominic's face. That was the right choice. Was it? She nearly got you killed. But she didn't. I'm here. We're here. And our daughter deserves to be born into a world where her parents choose mercy when they can. She smiled slightly. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. 18 days left, Dominic said. Am I passing your test? This isn't a test. It's us figuring out how to be together without destroying each other. She kissed him softly. But yes, you're doing better than I dared hope. The next week brought more changes. Dominic finalized the sale of his last illegal operation, transferring the proceeds to a legitimate investment portfolio. He hired a team of professional managers for his remaining businesses, making it clear he'd be a silent partner rather than an active operator. He met with lawyers to restructure everything, to build walls between his past and his future. And he was there, present, attentive, learning how to be the kind of husband Mara needed. He listened when she talked about her fears for the birth. He held her when pregnancy hormones made her cry over commercials. He rubbed her swollen ankles and brought her ice cream at midnight and read their daughter stories about dragons and princesses. Dr. Mitchell called it nesting when Dominic insisted on assembling the crib himself, refusing help even when he couldn't figure out the instructions. It took him 4 hours and 3 separate attempts, but when he finally finished, he stood back with such pride that Mara had to photograph it. Our daughter's first piece of furniture, he said, built by her father who had absolutely no idea what he was doing. It's perfect, Mara said, running her hand along the smooth wood. She's going to love it. She's going to destroy it in 2 years and we'll need to buy a toddler bed, Dominic corrected, but he was smiling. That's what the books say happens. You've been reading the books? All of them, multiple times. I'm terrified, Mara. Absolutely terrified that I'm going to be a terrible father. She crossed to him, wrapped her arms around him as much as her belly would allow. You're going to be a wonderful father. You've already proven that. How? By assembling furniture? By trying? By caring enough to be terrified? By reading every book and asking every question and wanting to do this right? She pulled back to look at him. Bad fathers don't worry about being bad fathers. They just are. That's circular logic. But it's true. She kissed him. Trust me on this. Our daughter is lucky to have you. On day 16, they moved back to the main house. The threat from Victor's allies had faded as word spread that Dominic Vale was out of the business. The safe house had served its purpose, but now they needed space, real space to prepare for the baby. The mansion felt different this time, less like a fortress and more like a home. Dominic had made changes while Mara was away. Warmer furniture in the living room, photographs on the walls, plants that Elena tended with maternal care. The guest room Mara had used before was being transformed into a nursery. I wanted to wait, Dominic said, showing her the plans. Wanted you to help choose colors and furniture and all the things I don't understand, but I had the walls painted neutral and the floors redone. The rest we can do together. Together. The word felt revolutionary. They spent the next days making decisions side by side, arguing good-naturedly over whether the curtains should be cream or pale yellow, debating the merits of different rocking chairs, assembling furniture, and laughing when pieces didn't fit quite right. It was domestic and normal, and everything Mara had craved during their marriage. Sarah came to visit, bringing gifts and exclaiming over the nursery. She pulled Mara aside while Dominic was carrying boxes upstairs. He's different, she said quietly. I don't know what happened between you two, but he's softer somehow, more human. He's trying to be the man he thinks I need, Mara said. And is he the man you need? Mara looked toward the stairs where she could hear Dominic talking to Marcus about furniture placement. He's getting there. We both are. On day 20, Dominic took her back to the doctor. Doctor. Mitchell did a full examination, measured the baby, checked all the vital signs. Everything looked perfect. The baby was the right size, positioned correctly, showing no signs of distress. You're at 34 weeks now, Dr. Mitchell said. Getting close. I want to see you weekly from here on out. And Mara, I have to say, your stress levels are much better than they were. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. In the car on the way home, Dominic reached for her hand. 10 days left. I know. Have you thought about what you want to do at the end of the 30 days? Mara looked at their joined hands, at the man who'd torn apart his empire to prove his love, at the father who'd read baby books until he could recite them from memory. I think I stopped counting somewhere around day 50. Does that mean? It means I want to try, Dominic. Really try. Not for 30 days, but for however long it takes to get this right. She squeezed his fingers. You've proven you can change. Now, I need to prove I can trust that change. She saw him swallow hard, saw moisture gleam in his eyes. That's all I needed to hear. But 3 days later, on day 23, everything changed. Mara was in the nursery, organizing baby clothes by size, when the first pain hit. It was sharp, sudden, radiating from her lower back around to her belly, with enough force to make her gasp. She grabbed the edge of the changing table, breathing through it, telling herself it was just Braxton Hicks, the false labor pains Dr. Mitchell had warned about. Then her water broke. She stared at the puddle on the floor, her mind refusing to process what was happening. 6 weeks early. Too early. The baby wasn't supposed to come yet. Dominic! Her voice came out shaky, panicked. Dominic! He was there in seconds, Marcus right behind him. He took one look at her face, at the water on the floor, and went absolutely pale. She's coming, Mara said, another contraction hitting hard enough to double her over. The baby's coming now. Dominic's face went from pale to determined in the space of a heartbeat. He crossed to Mara in 2 strides, catching her as another contraction made her knees buckle. Okay, we're okay, he said, and she could hear him forcing calm into his voice even though his hands shook slightly as he supported her. Marcus, get the car. Call Dr. Mitchell and tell her we're coming in. Tell her Mara's water broke and the contractions are already close together. 6 weeks early, Mara gasped, gripping his arms as the pain rolled through her. Dominic, it's too early. Something's wrong. Nothing's wrong. Babies come early sometimes. Dr. Mitchell said you and the baby are both healthy. He was already guiding her toward the stairs, moving carefully, supporting most of her weight. We're going to get you to the hospital and everything's going to be fine. The ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear. Contractions hit every 3 minutes, each one stronger than the last. And Mara found herself crushing Dominic's hand in a grip that would have made him wince if he'd been paying attention to anything other than her face. Breathe, love, he kept saying, his voice steady, even though his eyes were wild with concern. In through your nose, out through your mouth, just like we practiced. We never practiced, Mara panted. We were supposed to take classes. We were supposed to have time. Then we're improvising. Breathing, Mara. Focus on breathing. She tried, but panic kept overwhelming her. 6 weeks early. What if the baby's lungs weren't developed enough? What if there were complications? What if she'd waited too long to come back? Too long to get proper prenatal care? And now her daughter would pay the price for her choices. Stop, Dominic said firmly, cupping her face and forcing her to meet his eyes. I can see you spiraling. Stop. Our daughter is strong. She's a fighter, just like her mother. She's going to be fine. You don't know that. I do know that. Because I've watched you survive things that would have broken anyone else. I've seen you face down threats and danger and walk away stronger. Our daughter has your strength, Mara. She's going to be just fine. The conviction in his voice steadied her somehow. She nodded, squeezed his hand, and tried to focus on breathing through the next contraction. Dr. Mitchell was waiting when they arrived at the hospital, already in scrubs, her calm professionalism an anchor in the chaos. She examined Mara quickly, efficiently, while Dominic hovered at her shoulder looking like he might murder anyone who caused his wife additional pain. You're already at 6 centimeters, Dr. Mitchell said. This baby is in a hurry. We're going to get you set up in a delivery room and monitor both of you closely. The baby's early, but not dangerously so. 34 weeks gives us good odds for a healthy delivery. Good odds isn't certain, Dominic said, his voice tight. Nothing in childbirth is certain, Mr. Vale. But Mara is healthy, the baby has been developing well, and we have an excellent neonatal team standing by if needed. She looked at Mara. How are you feeling about pain management? We still have time for an epidural if you want one. Mara had read all the literature, had imagined going through labor naturally, proving she was strong enough to handle it. But another contraction hit and she heard herself say, Yes, please, whatever you recommend. The next 2 hours were a strange mix of intensity and waiting. The epidural helped with the pain, but left her feeling disconnected from her own body, watching the monitors that tracked her contractions and the baby's heartbeat like they belonged to someone else. Dominic never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement that ranged from sweet to absurd. You're doing amazing, he said during one particularly strong contraction. Absolutely amazing. I'm in awe of you. I'm not doing anything, Mara said, her voice slurred from exhaustion. The epidural is doing everything. You're growing our daughter and bringing her into the world. That's everything. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Elena arrived at some point, having been called by Marcus. She brought a bag with items Mara hadn't even thought about. A going-home outfit for the baby, toiletries, a change of clothes. She fussed over both of them with maternal efficiency before Dr. Mitchell shooed her to the waiting room. Family only in here, the doctor said, though her tone was kind. She's family, Mara said, but Elena was already backing toward the door. I'll wait outside and pray, she said. You focus on that beautiful baby. The labor progressed steadily, 7 centimeters, 8, 9. Each examination brought them closer to the moment Mara was both desperate for and terrified of. What if something went wrong? What if the baby needed immediate medical intervention? What if... Stop thinking, Dominic said, reading her expression. I can see every worry crossing your face. Just focus on right now, this moment, nothing else. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. The raw honesty in his voice made her look at him. I'm absolutely terrified. But we're doing this together, and whatever happens, we face it together. At 10 centimeters, Dr. Mitchell's demeanor shifted from monitoring to active coaching. Okay, Mara, next contraction I need you to push. Dad, you're going to help support her. Ready? Dominic moved into position, one arm around Mara's shoulders, his other hand gripping hers. His face was close to hers, his breath warm on her cheek. You've got this, he whispered. We've got this. The next contraction built like a wave, and Dr. Mitchell's voice cut through the fog. Now, Mara, push. Good, that's good. Keep going. Pushing was simultaneously the hardest and most natural thing Mara had ever done. Her body took over, instinct overwhelming conscious thought, and she bore down with everything she had. Dominic counted for her, his voice steady and sure, and when the contraction ended, she collapsed back against the pillows. Excellent, Dr. Mitchell said. I can see the head. A few more pushes and we'll have a baby. A few more turned into 7 more contractions, 7 more rounds of pushing until Mara thought she couldn't possibly continue. Her body was beyond exhausted, beyond pain, operating on some primal level she hadn't known existed. One more, Dr. Mitchell said. One more big push and she's here. Come on, Mara, meet your daughter. Dominic's forehead pressed against hers, his voice rough with emotion. One more, love. You can do this. Bring our girl into the world. The final contraction hit, and Mara pushed with everything she had left, every ounce of strength, every reserve of determination, every bit of love she felt for this tiny person who'd been growing inside her. She felt the moment the baby slipped free, heard Dr. Mitchell's exclamation of satisfaction, and then silence. Terrible, crushing silence where there should have been crying. Mara's heart stopped. She tried to sit up, tried to see, but Dominic's arm kept her steady, while his own face had gone absolutely white. Why isn't she crying? Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. Dominic, why isn't she crying? Dr. Mitchell was working quickly, efficiently, suctioning the baby's nose and mouth. The neonatal team that had been standing by moved in, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. Come on, sweetheart, Dr. Mitchell murmured. Come on, baby girl. Let me hear you. The seconds stretched into eternity. Mara watched Dominic's face, saw tears streaming down his cheeks, saw his lips moving in what might have been prayer or plea. Her hand found his, gripped so tight she could feel bones grinding. Then, a cough, a sputter, and finally, gloriously, a thin wail that built into a full-throated cry of outrage. "There she is," Dr. Mitchell said, her own voice thick with emotion. "There's our fighter." Relief crashed over Mara so intensely she started sobbing. Dominic was crying too, his face buried in her neck, his shoulders shaking. They clung to each other while their daughter announced her presence to the world with increasingly furious screams. "She's small, but she's breathing on her own," Dr. Mitchell said, bringing the baby over. 5 pounds, 2 ounces, 15 inches long, perfect APGAR scores. She placed the tiny, squalling bundle on Mara's chest. "Meet your daughter." Nothing could have prepared Mara for the moment she first looked at her daughter's face. Tiny, red, furious at being removed from her warm cocoon, and absolutely perfect. She had dark hair plastered to her head, unfocused eyes that might turn gray like Dominic's, and the most beautiful fingers Mara had ever seen. "Oh," was all Mara could manage. "Oh, she's perfect," Dominic finished, his voice breaking. "She's absolutely perfect." He touched the baby's hand with one finger, and impossibly tiny fingers wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. Something in Dominic's expression cracked open, all the walls he'd built over years of survival and violence crumbling in the face of this 6-pound miracle. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your dad. I'm going to do my best by you. I promise." The baby's cries had settled into small, mewling sounds. She turned her head toward Mara's chest, instinct already driving her to seek food and comfort. Dr. Mitchell helped Mara adjust, guiding the baby to nurse for the first time. "She knows exactly what to do," the doctor said with satisfaction. "Strong, healthy, and clearly determined, just like her parents." For the next few minutes, the world narrowed to the three of them: Mara, Dominic, and their daughter, learning how to be a family. The medical team worked around them, delivering the placenta and monitoring Mara's condition, but it all felt distant and unimportant compared to the tiny person in her arms. "We need a name," Dominic said eventually, stroking the baby's dark hair with trembling fingers. "We can't keep calling her the baby." They discussed names during the past weeks but never settled on anything. Nothing had felt right, or maybe they'd both been afraid to make it too real before they were sure they could make their marriage work. "Elena," Mara said softly. "I want to name her Elena." Dominic looked up, surprise flickering across his face. After the woman who took care of me when I felt most alone, who kept your house running and your life in order, who prayed for us both." Mara looked down at her daughter. "Elena Rose Vale, if that's okay with you." "It's more than okay." He pressed a kiss to Mara's temple. "It's perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect. I'm exhausted and probably look terrible. You've never been more beautiful." And the way he said it, looking at her with her hair sweaty and her face pale and a baby in her arms, she believed him. The neonatal team wanted to take Elena for a full examination and measurements. Mara's every instinct screamed against letting her daughter out of her sight, but Dominic squeezed her hand. "They need to make sure everything's okay," he said gently. "I'll go with her. I won't let her out of my sight for a second. Promise? On my life." He carefully lifted Elena from Mara's arms, cradling her with the kind of reverence usually reserved for priceless artifacts. "We'll be right back, little one. Your mama needs to rest." Mara watched them leave, Dominic walking beside the isolette where Elena lay, his hand through the opening to maintain contact with his daughter, and felt something inside her chest expand and settle at the same time. This was her family. This was what she'd been fighting for. Dr. Mitchell finished the post-delivery care and helped Mara get cleaned up and moved to a recovery room. "You did beautifully," she said. "Both of you are healthy, and that baby is a fighter. 34 weeks and breathing on her own. That's excellent. How long will she need to stay in the hospital?" "We'll monitor her for at least 48 hours. If she continues to eat well and maintain her body temperature, you might be able to take her home in 3 or 4 days." Dr. Mitchell made notes on her chart. "Get some rest. You've earned it. But rest felt impossible. Mara lay in the hospital bed, still feeling phantom kicks from a belly that was suddenly much smaller, waiting for Dominic to bring their daughter back. Every minute felt like an hour. When he finally returned, Elena was wrapped in a hospital blanket decorated with tiny stars, a pink cap on her head. Dominic carried her like she was made of glass, his expression one of absolute wonder. All her tests came back perfect, he said, carefully transferring Elena back to Mara's arms. They want to monitor her weight and feeding, but the pediatrician said she's incredibly healthy for being early. Strong lungs, good reflexes, already nursing like a champion. Elena had fallen asleep, her tiny face relaxed and peaceful. Mara counted her fingers and toes for the 100th time, still amazed that she and Dominic had created something so impossibly perfect. Marcus is outside with Elena, our Elena, Dominic said, settling into the chair beside the bed. She's crying and wants to come in, but I told her to wait until you're ready for visitors. She can come in. I want to show her the baby. Dominic opened the door and spoke quietly to someone outside. Moments later, Elena the elder entered, her face streaked with tears, her hands clasped together. "Oh, Mrs. Vale," she breathed, approaching the bed slowly. "Oh, she's beautiful." "We named her after you," Mara said, watching the housekeeper's face transform. "Elena Rose Vale. I hope that's okay." The older woman pressed her hands to her mouth, tears flowing freely now. You named her after me? Oh, my dear girl, I'm honored. So very honored." "You took care of both of us when we needed it most," Dominic said, his voice rough. "It seemed right." Elena Sr. reached out a hesitant hand, and Mara shifted the baby so she could see her tiny namesake's face. "Hello, little Elena. Welcome to the world, precious girl. You have no idea how loved you already are." The older woman stayed for only a few minutes before excusing herself to let Mara rest, but the joy on her face stayed with them long after she left. Over the next few hours, a steady stream of visitors came and went. Sarah arrived with flowers and tears, holding baby Elena with the kind of reverence that suggested she understood exactly how miraculous this moment was. Marcus stopped by to verify the security arrangements Dominic had made for the hospital room. Even Thomas, the driver, poked his head in to offer congratulations. But eventually, the visitors left and the hospital settled into nighttime quiet. Nurses came and went, checking Mara's vitals and helping with feedings. But mostly it was just the three of them in the dimly lit room. Dominic had pulled his chair close to the bed, close enough that he could watch both Mara and Elena with the kind of intensity that might have been overwhelming if it hadn't been so full of love. "I can't stop looking at her," he admitted. "I keep thinking if I look away, this will all turn out to be a dream." "I know the feeling." Mara adjusted Elena in her arms, marveling at how someone so small could feel so heavy with importance. "Everything I was afraid of, the pain, the complications, whether I could do this, none of it matters now. She's here and she's perfect. You were amazing. Watching you bring her into the world," he stopped, his voice catching. "I've never been more proud of anyone in my life. Even though she came early and scared us both half to death? Especially because of that. She's already proving she does things on her own timeline." He reached out, traced Elena's tiny ear with one finger. "She gets that from you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their daughter sleep. She made small sounds, squeaks and sighs that seemed impossibly loud coming from someone so tiny. Every movement, every breath felt like a miracle. "I've been thinking," Dominic said eventually, "about the 30 days, about the divorce papers you brought." Mara's heart clenched. "Dominic, let me finish." He took her free hand, laced their fingers together. "We're on day 23, 7 days left until our agreement ends. 7 days until you're supposed to decide whether to stay or go. I already told you I wanted to try, that I'd stopped counting. I know, but I need to say this." He met her eyes, his gray gaze steady and sure. "I don't want to wait 7 more days. I don't want you staying with me because of an agreement or because you think you owe me a chance. I want you to marry me again." Mara's breath caught. "We're already married." "Legally, yes. But that marriage was built on passion and attraction and not much else. We didn't really know each other. We didn't understand what we were committing to. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. I want to marry you again, Mara. I want to stand in front of everyone we love and promise to be the man you and Elena deserve. I want to build a marriage based on trust and honesty and choosing each other every single day. Tears spilled down Mara's cheeks. You're proposing to your own wife? I'm proposing to the mother of my child, to the woman who survived my worst and still came back, to the person who makes me want to be better than I ever thought I could be. His voice was thick with emotion. So yes, I'm proposing. Mara Whitmore Vale, will you marry me again? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the husband and father you both deserve? She looked down at Elena, sleeping peacefully in her arms, then back at Dominic. She thought about the past 23 days, watching him dismantle his empire, learning to cook breakfast, assembling furniture with determination, if not skill. She thought about the way he'd held her through labor, the tears on his face when Elena was born, the tenderness in his voice when he spoke to their daughter. This wasn't the man she'd married 2 years ago. This was someone better, someone who'd chosen to change, who'd proven he could put family above power, who'd shown her that love could be both fierce and gentle. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with joy. Yes, I'll marry you again. I'll choose you every day for the rest of our lives. Dominic's face transformed, relief and happiness, and love crashing together into an expression so open it took her breath away. He leaned forward carefully, mindful of the baby between them, and kissed her with a tenderness that felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Elena had woken and was making small, fussy sounds. Dominic reached for her, and Mara transferred the baby to his arms, watching as he cradled their daughter against his chest. Hear that, little one? He murmured. Your mama said yes, which means you're stuck with me as your dad. I'm going to do my best by you, I promise. I'm going to teach you to be strong and kind and brave. I'm going to show you that real strength is choosing love over power, that family matters more than empire, that the best things in life are worth fighting for. Elena yawned, utterly unconcerned with her father's promises, and Mara laughed through her tears. She's not impressed, she said. She will be. Give me 18 years. He rocked Elena gently, natural as if he'd been doing it his whole life. We're going to be okay, aren't we? The three of us? Better than okay. We're going to be happy. Over the next 3 days, they settled into the strange rhythm of new parenthood, learning Elena's cries, the hungry cry versus the tired cry versus the I just want to be held cry. Figuring out feeding schedules and diaper changes and how to function on 2 hours of sleep. Mara's body ached and healing was slower than she'd expected. But every time she looked at Elena, every time she watched Dominic cradle their daughter with such obvious love, it all felt worth it. Dr. Mitchell cleared them to go home on the 4th day. Elena had gained weight instead of losing it, was nursing well, and showed no signs of complications from being early. The pediatrician was optimistic about her development and scheduled a follow-up appointment for the next week. The ride home felt surreal. Elena slept in her car seat, tiny even in the infant-sized restraint. Dominic drove with exaggerated care, treating every bump like a potential catastrophe, until Mara finally told him to relax before they got rear-ended for going too slowly. The house had been transformed in their absence. Elena Sr. had clearly been working non-stop. The nursery was completely finished, every piece of furniture in place, soft blankets and tiny clothes organized with military precision. There were flowers throughout the house, meals prepared and frozen for easy heating, everything arranged to make their transition home as smooth as possible. She didn't have to do all this, Mara said, looking around with wonder. Try stopping her, Dominic said with a smile. She's been waiting her whole life to spoil a baby. Now she has one named after her? We don't stand a chance. Settling Elena into the nursery felt momentous. They'd imagined this moment so many times over the past weeks, but having it actually happen, placing their daughter in the crib Dominic had assembled, watching her sleep in the room they'd prepared together, made everything real in a way the hospital hadn't. She's really ours, Mara whispered, standing beside the crib with Dominic's arm around her waist. We really get to keep her. For the rest of our lives. He pressed a kiss to her temple. And we're going to do right by her. Both of us. That night, they took shifts with Elena's feedings. Dominic insisted Mara rest and brought the baby to her when she needed to nurse, then walked Elena back to sleep afterward with the kind of patience Mara had never seen in him before. Around 3 in the morning, she found him in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair with Elena on his chest, both of them asleep. The sight made her heart clench. This dangerous man who'd built an empire on fear and violence, reduced a putty by 6 pounds of infant. This was who he could be when he chose love over power. This was the father their daughter deserved. She took a photo with her phone, capturing the moment, then gently woke him to suggest they all get some real sleep. The weeks that followed were exhausting and beautiful in equal measure. Elena was a relatively easy baby. She slept in 3-hour stretches, fed well, and only cried when she had a legitimate reason. But even easy babies required constant attention, and Mara found herself operating in a fog of sleep deprivation and hormones and overwhelming love. Dominic threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he'd once applied to business. He learned to change diapers without flinching, mastered the art of the swaddle, and could soothe Elena's cries with a combination of rocking and humming that seemed to work like magic. He took night shifts without complaint and brought Mara food and water and anything she needed while she was nursing. He also continued dismantling the last pieces of his criminal empire. The final warehouse sold, the last offshore account closed. He met with lawyers to ensure everything was legal and clean and couldn't come back to haunt them. By the time Elena was 3 weeks old, Dominic Vale, the crime lord, had ceased to exist. What remained was just a man, a husband, a father, someone learning how to build a life based on love rather than power. "I don't miss it," he told Mara one evening while they watched Elena sleep in her bassinet beside their bed. "I thought I might. Thought I'd wake up one day and regret walking away from everything I'd built. But I don't. This is better, so much better." "No regrets?" Mara asked, needing to hear him say it. "None. Well, one, I regret that I didn't do this sooner, that I wasted time trying to be someone you couldn't love instead of becoming the person you deserved. I always loved you, Dominic. Even when I ran, even when I was terrified, I loved you. I know, and now I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of that love." 2 months after Elena's birth, they planned the wedding. Not a grand affair like their first marriage, which had been more about spectacle than substance. This time, they wanted intimate and meaningful, just close friends and family in the garden of their home, celebrating a commitment they'd chosen rather than stumbled into. Sarah helped with the planning, bringing fabric swatches and flower samples to the house while cooing over Elena. Elena Sr. baked and fussed and cried happy tears at least 3 times a day. Even Marcus got involved, helping Dominic choose a suit and offering surprisingly good advice about wedding vows. The day of the wedding dawned clear and perfect. Mara stood in her bedroom looking at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She'd chosen a simple dress in soft ivory, nothing like the elaborate gown she'd worn the first time. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She wore minimal makeup, but she'd never felt more beautiful. A soft knock sounded, and Sarah poked her head in. "Ready?" "More than ready." Downstairs, chairs had been arranged in the garden, facing an arbor covered in white roses. The guest list was tiny, maybe 20 people total, but each one mattered. Elena Sr. sat in the front row, holding baby Elena, who was dressed in the most elaborate christening gown money could buy. Marcus stood beside Dominic as best man, looking uncomfortable in his suit but pleased to be included. And Dominic, he stood beneath the arbor in a dark suit, his eyes tracking Mara's approach with an intensity that stole her breath. When she reached him, he took her hands and she could feel them trembling slightly. The officiant they'd chosen was a simple courthouse judge who'd agreed to do the ceremony in their garden. She spoke briefly about love and commitment and the importance of choosing each other every day, but Mara barely heard the words. She was too focused on Dominic's face, on the tears she could see gathering in his eyes, on the way he looked at her like she was his entire world. When it came time for vows, Dominic cleared his throat and began to speak. "Mara, the first time we got married, I promised you forever without understanding what that meant. I thought love was passion and possession, that keeping you close meant keeping you safe. I was wrong about so much. His voice was steady despite the emotion there. Today, I promise you something different. I promise to choose you every single day, even when it's hard. I promise to be honest, even when the truth is uncomfortable. I promise to be the kind of father our daughter deserves and the kind of husband you've always needed. I promise that I will never stop working to be worthy of your love. Mara's turn came, and her voice shook as she spoke the words she'd written in the quiet moments between feedings and diaper changes. Dominic, you've shown me what it means to truly change. You've proven that people can choose to be better than their pasts, that love is powerful enough to transform even the hardest hearts. I promise to trust in that change, to build a future with you based on honesty and partnership. I promise to be your partner in all things, to choose you every day just as you choose me. And I promise to show our daughter that real love, the kind worth having, requires both people to be brave enough to be vulnerable. The judge pronounced them married again, and when Dominic kissed her, it felt like both a beginning and a homecoming. Their guests applauded, and baby Elena chose that moment to let out a wail of protest that made everyone laugh. The reception was simple: food and wine, music and conversation, Elena being passed from guest to guest, while Mara and Dominic circulated together, his hand never leaving the small of her back. They cut a cake that Elena Sr. had baked, danced to a song that meant something only to them, and watched the sun set over the garden where they'd promised each other forever for the second time. Later, after the guests had left and the house had settled into quiet, they stood in Elena's nursery watching their daughter sleep. She'd grown so much in just 2 months, her face filling out, her features becoming more defined, her personality starting to emerge. She was curious and determined, easy to smile and quick to voice her displeasure, and already had both her parents wrapped around her tiny fingers. "We did it," Mara said softly. "We actually made it work." "We're still making it work," Dominic corrected. "Every day. But, yeah, we're doing it together." He pulled her closer, pressed a kiss to her hair. "Thank you for coming back, for giving us another chance, for believing I could change. Thank you for changing, for choosing us over everything else." She leaned into him, watching their daughter's chest rise and fall with each breath. "I love you, Dominic Vale. Both versions of you, the one I married and the one you became." "I love you too, more than I have words for." Elena stirred in her sleep, one tiny fist escaping her swaddle to wave in the air. Without waking, she settled again, completely secure in the knowledge that she was safe and loved and wanted, just like her parents had finally learned to be. 6 months later, Mara sat in her home office, the same room where she'd once tried to build an identity separate from being Dominic's wife, working on a grant proposal for the children's charity she'd rejoined. Elena played on a blanket nearby, rolling from back to front with the determination of someone who'd recently mastered the skill and wanted to practice it constantly. Dominic appeared in the doorway with coffee, a habit he'd developed of bringing her afternoon pick-me-ups when he knew she was working. "How's the proposal going?" he asked, setting the mug on her desk. "Good. Sarah thinks we have a real shot at the funding." She saved her work and turned to find him watching Elena with the same expression of wonder he'd had since the day she was born. "You still can't believe she's real, can you?" "Not even a little bit." He sat on the floor beside the blanket, immediately becoming Elena's favorite playground as she crawled toward him with delighted squeals. "Some days I wake up and think I'm going to find out this was all a dream, that you're still gone, that I'm still the man I was. But you're not. You're exactly who you chose to become." Mara joined them on the floor, completing their small circle. "And we're exactly where we're supposed to be." Elena grabbed her father's finger and tried to pull it to her mouth, gumming at it with the intensity of someone who was definitely teething. Dominic made exaggerated faces that made her giggle, and Mara's heart felt so full it might burst. This was what they'd fought for, what they'd survived for. Not the grand gestures or the dramatic declarations, but these quiet moments of being a family. These ordinary, extraordinary days of learning to love each other without fear or violence or the weight of an empire between them. The divorce papers sat in a drawer somewhere, unsigned and unnecessary. They'd never speak of them again. Instead, they had wedding photos from a ceremony that mattered, commitment vows that were honest, and a future built on choice rather than chance. They had a daughter who would grow up knowing that real strength meant changing when necessary, that love required courage, and that family was worth any sacrifice. They had each other, flawed and fighting and choosing to stay despite how hard it sometimes was. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not power or empire or the past that had nearly destroyed them. Just this: a man, a woman, and the baby they'd created together, building something better than either of them had known they deserved. The divorce that was supposed to end everything had instead saved them both. And they lived that truth every single day, completely and forever.